It doesn't matter what character I play, you're always your character's lawyer. You're their advocate. Dead Poets Society, directed by Peter Weir, starring, obviously, the great Robin Williams. I remember everything about that movie. Robin was a genius, meaning I never met anybody like him, remotely like him. He was a comic genius. Take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. They'd all be different. Just endless. But funnily enough, he wasn't really the master on set. Peter Weir was a great leader and showed all of us how to be serious about making art. And that doesn't mean like self-serious. We played around. He had speakers installed in the classroom so you could just crank the music. I felt I was in the hands of a person who was a serious craftsman. It wasn't some airy-fairy like art thing. He was going to build a movie brick by brick. Todd Anderson was my character. It's an aspect of me that I've visited in other characters too. Somebody who has no self-confidence. And it was funny because I wanted to play Neil. There's the character who killed himself, is a really outgoing guy, and I was a pretty gregarious young man, you know, so I thought that I was more right for that part. And Robert Sean Leonard, who played Neil, thought he was more right for Todd because he was a very shy and withdrawn person. And Peter had this beautiful notion, Peter Weir, that you always cast for the final color, meaning that at the end of the movie, my character needed to stand up on this desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," and he wanted to believe that. He said that you have to act the shy part, but so then when the truth comes out, your real self is revealed. "Captain, my Captain."
Sit down, Mr. Anderson. You hear me?
Something I've never forgotten, casting for the final color. After Dead Poets Society, I thought that's what making a movie was like. Working with Robin Williams and Peter Weir. I had an amazing experience with these people, and that's what I thought making a movie was like. And I was continually disappointed after that, because it's not what making a movie like. Often it's business, often people are there for a paycheck. When things go right, it all seems very easy. And when things are difficult, then it's like, wow, you see how hard it is to make a good movie. Explorers, directed by Joe Dante, my first movie with River Phoenix. I learned a lot watching River's career. When he did My Own Private Idaho, it was an incredibly dangerous thing to do as a teen idol, to play a gay character. It's very common now, and it's one of the biggest things that's shifted from my generation to my sons, is people being comfortable talking about homosexuality. That was very verboten when River and I were 21. River was an artist. You know, he didn't think like that. He thought outside the box like that. His whole family, you know, were not ordinary thinkers. They were revolutionary thinkers. You know, they were the first vegetarians I'd ever met. I remember going to sleep over at his house, and I had these, you know, mushroom and avocado burgers, and I remember thinking, what is this? But they really opened my eyes, and River was a very beautiful person. And obviously, you learn that it's a dangerous road. Is the road of a teen celebrity, you know, or any kind of celebrity for that matter. Reality Bites, starring Winona Ryder, directed by Ben Stiller. So it was Ben Stiller's first movie. He was this immensely talented young man. He was a comic, but to my mind, he struck me as a comic the way Buster Keaton is a comic or something. I mean, he's dark and serious and wild and mischievous and strange and talented. And of course, it was really Winona's movie. Winona made that happen. Winona was the biggest star in the world at that moment, and that whole movie is her passion project. And you know, that character was another aspect of me, you know? I mean, pretentious and self-serious and full of himself and wildly insecure. And I don't know, it was guys I knew, guys I wanted to be, guys I didn't like. If you really do it right, it doesn't matter who you're playing, you really get immersed in their point of view. I love Troy, you know? Hey, That's My Bike is still the best name for a band. The Before trilogy, Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, Before Midnight, directed by Richard Linklater. I met Richard Linklater before Dazed and Confused had come out, but I saw an early screening of it because I was running this theater company, and he came to see the play that night. He told me about Before Sunrise. You know, he sent me the script. It's back, you know, before email and stuff, so we actually partied all night. I remember saying goodbye to him at like 4:10 in the morning, and then I woke up at noon, and there in my mailbox was a script. That's the way I remember it anyway, you know, with his handwriting on it. Hey, check this out. It was before sunrise, and I read it, and don't tell him, but it was a mess, frankly. But I knew I wanted to work with him, so I actually thought he was offering me the part, but he wasn't. I realized my agent's like, no, he wants you to audition. So I came in and auditioned a shit ton of times, and I finally got the part, and we started working on the movie. It was one of the best summers of my life. Summer in 1994 in Vienna with Julie Delpy, and all I remember is running lines. We just ran, you know, epic lines in that movie, and we just had to spend every day memorizing and writing. And people think, you know, the movie has the illusion of spontaneity. It's meticulously rehearsed, because if you watch that movie, a lot of the movie plays out in single takes. So it's not a movie you can find in the editing room. You can't cut anything out. So Rick would have to rehearse with us over and over and over again. We rehearsed that movie for over a month before we shot it. And that's rare with movies. 9 years later, we did Before Sunset, and 9 years after that, we did Before Midnight. I didn't have an idea there'd be a trilogy until we finished the third. We spent months and months trying to come up with a title, Before Sunset. You know, the first film had been called Before Sunrise, and everybody said, you're making a sequel, what's it going to be called? Before Sunset? And everybody laughed, because it just seemed so obvious, you know. And we were like, no, it should be called this, or we'd come up with some pretentious title, or this pretentious title. And finally one day, we were like, maybe we should just call it Before Sunset. People who are fans of it sometimes ask me, you know, will there be a fourth? And there's something that feels complete about it to me. The first one opens with a couple in their 40s fighting on a train, and the camera pulls back to reveal these young people. And then in the third movie, we are the couple fighting in our 40s. And there's something cyclical about that. To revisit those movies each decade of my life and getting it to be kind of this shadow self, an alternate universe where Jesse and Celine really exist, you know. And Julie and Rick and I, we grew to love Jesse and Celine. Still do. Boyhood, Richard Linklater. I can't separate Boyhood from my relationship with Richard Linklater, you know. I mean, he had this idea that how phony most movies about coming-of-age movies were, because they happen in one moment. Whereas literature, you can tell the whole story of somebody's childhood. It's much easier to cover time, but because actors age, you either have to hire different actors, which kind of breaks the spell, or you have to pretend like that a person's life was changed in one moment. As opposed to what Boyhood is about, is this accumulation of moments that come to feel like one thing, called your youth. It's the one time of our lives, in America anyway, we're all in the same grid, first grade through 12th grade. We all kind of know where, you know, when you're in 8th grade, you know where you're going to be in 3 years. You're going to be in 11th grade. It's an interesting architecture for a movie. And I remember him kind of telling me the idea, he wanted me to do a portrait of fatherhood, you know, and to really use myself and my experiences and as a child of divorce, and I had a marriage that was breaking up, to write about that and help him ride shotgun with him when he did this huge adventure of trying to make a movie over 12 years. And it's the most incredible idea I'd ever heard. I remember as soon as he said it, I was like, oh, wow, man, let's do it. But of course, you're worried, who was ever going to give you money to make a movie that is going to take, they're not going to get return on for 13 years. And you can't even sign any contracts, because, you know, it's not legal to sign a contract for more than 7 years. So the whole thing was a handshake deal. I didn't think that we would finish the movie for 5 or 6 years. I hoped we did, but it wasn't until we were 7 or 8 years into it, I was like, you know what, we're going to finish this thing. Gattaca, Andrew Nichols' first film. Yeah, I fell in love on that set, and, you know, Uma got pregnant and had Maya. That's a great time in my life.
Maya looks exactly like the both of you. It's incredible.
Well, you know, people can say that, but, you know, all children look a lot like their parents. They act like because their parents are movie actors, she's somehow different than any other human being on the planet. Most people look a lot like their mom and dad. Gattaca's a meticulously designed film. The costumes are incredible, the art direction is incredible, and it's difficult to do a futuristic movie without a lot of money. We really had to design a world, and Andrew was brilliant. You know, he got 50s cars and Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, and he just made this whole hodgepodge of design influences that was beautiful, and the writing, of course, was phenomenal. I've done two really good science fiction, Gattaca and Predestination. Predestination is a movie that many people haven't seen, but it's one I'm really proud of. The guys who made that movie, the Spirig brothers, are big Gattaca fans. And so I think that's why they wanted me to be in it, is Predestination owes, from a design point of view, it owes some ideas to Gattaca. Predestination, my second film with the Spirig brothers. My favorite Predestination story is that the other day I had a cop pull me over. And I was like, what is it? He goes, look, I'm sorry to pull you over, but I gotta know. Predestination. I watched it twice. What happened? and he's like, are they? And I was like, they are. And he's like, wow, thank you. I love that movie. I love science fiction. That's based on a Robert Heinlein short story. Sarah Snook gives one of my favorite performances I've ever been party to, you know. People don't really talk about acting. You know, if you make an indie movie, an art film, people talk about the acting, but when the acting disappears inside a genre film, it gets lost because people get, the movie works and you get lost in the world and you just believe the character. But Sarah Snook gives one, she plays a man, she plays a woman, she plays in between, she plays one of the, just an amazing performance that also serves a science fiction plot. Great Expectations, Alfonso Cuarón's first American movie. He's gone on to be one of the great directors of his generation, and I feel proud that I knew that the second I met him. We met at a diner in Chelsea. He wanted me to do Great Expectations. I had no desire to do that movie. You know, that whole novel is about class, and I really felt that if you're gonna make a movie about class in America, that Pip, my character, should be Latino or African American. He should be, you know, a person of color. But Alfonso completely disagreed, and he loved Before Sunrise, and he wanted me to play the part, and he was completely compelling. An amazing artist. Just the way he talked about movies was so exciting. De Niro is, you know, one of a handful of first ballot Hall of Famers that I've ever come in contact with. He's just one of the greatest people of my profession, and he was the top. And then, in the last 20 years, he's gone on to be one of the greatest comics of his generation. I just admire him so much, you know, and he's a no bullshit guy. I learned a lot working with him simply because I was still very young and I was waiting for people to give me permission to do the work I wanted to do. Gwyneth and I were friends before that started, and we're kind of waiting for directors to give us permission to do great work. And De Niro just comes in and does it. You know, he's in charge of his own work. I learned a lot. Ultimately, like I said, they didn't really, Alfonso was trying to do something new with it. We all just goofed around trying to make a story that spoke to us. People like that movie now, and they liked it when it came out, but it came out a couple weeks after Titanic. And so nobody gave a shit about anything but Titanic for about 9 months after Titanic came out. Particularly Another Romance, you know, that didn't involve a giant ship sinking and the most incredible effects of all time, and Leo and Kate and James Cameron. So we were kind of lost in the, what do you call it, the aftershock of Titanic. Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, directed by Sidney Lumet. Sidney Lumet's last film, he was 83. Another, you know, I've worked with a handful of genuine card-carrying masters from the filmmaking department, but Sidney, I mean, I was being directed by a guy who directed Marlon Brando in one of his greatest performances in a black and white movie written by Tennessee Williams. And Henry Fonda's greatest part in 12 Angry Men, you know. Al Pacino, he directed Al Pacino in Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon. But it wasn't just like some doddering old dude. You know, he was on fire. He was not going to let this opportunity go by. He grabbed it by the hair. If you see that movie, it's a young man's movie. I mean, it's angry and blistering and surprising and strange, and it's not the work of somebody phoning anything in.
Was there any idea that it would be his last movie or anything like that?
I remember sitting on an airplane with him. We were going to the Toronto Film Festival. And he said to me, he said, you know, if we told everybody I was dying, I'd win the Oscar for this picture. That's how dumb the Oscars are. He said, they just need a narrative, you know? And I remember thinking there, does he mean that he's sick? So you don't let yourself think those thoughts when you're sitting with him. I mean, you know, you just don't want to think about if it's his last film. It seems like bad luck or something like that. But it's not like it was a surprise that could have happened. Hamlet, directed by Michael Amareda, written by a young, aspiring writer named William Shakespeare. Hamlet lends itself to reinterpretation more than, Dickens, I would say. And Michael Amareda had a brilliant idea. This is something, I remember when he first talked to me about it, he's like, he had this vision of Hamlet walking through a video store and not being able to decide what movie to rent. And that kind of represents an existential crisis. Funnily enough, they don't even have video stores anymore. But at that moment in 2000, now it'd be the equivalent of going online and getting lost. I felt lucky because I was I'd always had a dream of playing Hamlet young. So often on stage you see older guys, you see guys my age play Hamlet, Really, he's still in school. He's supposed to be a student, I always thought. And I was proud to be in my 20s and playing Hamlet. Training Day. Jay Coit was a great character, but he existed in relationship to Alonzo, I got to sit shotgun on one of the greatest actors of our time, creating one of his indelible portraits, as he worked on that. Getting to watch, we did ride-arounds with cops, and we saw some crazy things, and Antoine Fuqua is an amazing director, and he was young, and he had something to say. Denzel had something to say, and that script was ice hot. But I'd really gotten a lot of confidence. The first 10 years or so of my career, I would say I might have had some talent, but I didn't have any confidence. You can't have real confidence without experience. You're kind of faking it when you start. Everybody is. You got to. And I was just starting to get confidence, enough confidence to act with Denzel and not, be a shrinking violet. Anything that I had learned from De Niro and stuff, went to another level with Denzel because it was just a much more all-encompassing experience. Magnificent Seven. Antoine said that he and Denzel were making Magnificent Seven. And I said, that means there's 6 other parts, dude, and I better be one of them. And there we were, all deciding to make a Hollywood Western. Antoine had every toy. We had Gatling guns and 100 horses and cranes. And it's the biggest budget movie I ever made. It was an event making that movie. It was 107 in the shade and raining. We'd spend the day on the horse. I'd be in like this wool suit and I'd have to change my suit like 4 times a day, just dripping in sweat. We had the best stunt team in the world. This guy, Jeff Dashenall, was old-fashioned. There's no computer tricks. These guys, they were out there. It was like the stuff of legend, these guys. I told Antoine, I was like, one day we're walking down the street, I was like, my character had this lame death, and I was like, I'm the sniper. I'd be up there. I should be in the church tower. I should get shot up there and fall down. And then I looked over because Jeff was the lead stunt guy, and his son, Nick, was my stunt guy. And he goes, that means Nick's got to fall from that church. And I was like, oh, yeah, it does. Nick will do it, won't you, Nick? Hell yeah, Dad. And, and they did it. Beautiful, beautiful stunt. Maggie's Plan, written and directed by Rebecca Miller. It was wonderful to be directed by a woman. 95% of the movies I've done have been directed by men. It's just been I'm a symptom of my era. But Rebecca Miller is just fabulously dressed, funny, witty, smart, and, kind of all over the place, but then secretly brilliant. Greta Gerwig is, I'm working with some of the best women of my generation, Julianne Moore. I haven't been in very many comedies. And when I started acting, I really thought that's what I do. I remember when I started, my favorite actor, one of them was John Cusack and Warren Beatty. So Maggie's Plan was fun for me to channel my inner Warren Beatty. One of my favorite lines, like, if I don't want you to fall in love with the pickle man. Something like that. I can't remember it exactly, but I liked working with Greta. She comes at acting from a similar vantage point than I do. And so does Julianne Moore, actually. We all, well, particularly both of them, they think like filmmakers. Julie really understands the way movies work and how storytelling works, the actual geometry and math of making a good movie and what an audience wants to see. She has a great awareness of that. Greta is a writer. I like being on set acting with people who write, like myself. I like people like me. First Reformed, written and directed by Paul Schrader. I had never worked with Paul before. Paul, for people that don't know, he wrote Taxi Driver. And when I got this script, I knew it was one of the best characters I'd ever been offered. He's a great writer. And great writers speak to their time and speak to their moment. And First Reformed, I think, speaks to right now in much the same way. When you think about movies and the history of movies, you don't really see very many movies that deal in a grown-up, serious way with your spiritual life. Most of us wonder why we're born and why we die, and wonder what we're doing here. What is it all for? Why do we go through all this? And there's a certain community of the world that spends their life thinking about this, which is the religious community. And you don't see very many of them in movies. If you do, it's like in The Exorcist or something, and they're bad guys, or they're comics. You don't see a serious portrait of somebody who's dedicated their life to some of the toughest questions. And Paul is smart enough and well-educated to write such a part. The movie, in a lot of ways, is like a scream. It's a roar from an old lion, who's kind of roaring at his own generation and roaring at young people. He's just asking questions. And I think that that's like one of the jobs of movies.